Death Row Records is responsible for many classic hip-hop albums during the 90s from a critical and commercial standpoint, such as albums like The Chronic, Doggy Style, All Eyes on Me, Dog Food, 7 Day Theory, the Above the Rim soundtrack, and Necessary Reference by Lady of Rage. Death Row may have also been the most polarizing record label group of all time, especially during the 90s when they was on top, with hip-hop acts like Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Tupac, Lady of Rage, Corrupt, Daz Dillinger, Nate Dogg, The DLC, and Michelet, which all these artists played a huge role in why hip-hop became so popular still to this day. But with all that success that Death Row had coming in, it was also fueled with a lot of outside turmoil issues and gang ties with street politics that played a huge part on Death Row's downfall, not only just from a business perspective, but also the music career from these acts, especially from the top three such as Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Tupac, where he would be shot and killed during the height of his career. For Dre, he would leave Death Row entirely due to the business of Death Row and where he seen it was going due to gang affiliation, and for Snoop, he became the artist that was the effect of all this, which hindered his sophomore album The Dogfather, never really living up to the expectations of his prior project Doggy Style, which was an undeniable career-defining classic, which helped introduce a new sound of hip-hop called G-Funk while Dr. Dre was by his side. The album Doggy Style will be released on November 23rd, 1993, and would debut at number 1 on the Billboard 200s, selling over 806,000 copies in the first week, which was at the time a hip-hop record of albums sold in the first week, and becoming the fastest-selling hip-hop album.
This motherfucker don't miss.
And by 2015, it sold over 7 million copies in the US and 11 million worldwide, so it was clear that Snoop Dogg's debut album really put him on the map and made him a bona fide superstar just like that. It's even been said by many Death Row label mates that Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style album helped build Death Row due to all the money that the album generated and the different sound that it was bringing in music. The album was a cultural shift from just purely gangsta rap to now melodies and synth-driven funk beats with a little West Coast lingo, and Dr. Dre's The Chronic helping with that sound too.
This is dedicated to everybody that was down from day one. Welcome to Death Row.
But with Death Row Records becoming a staple in this industry, with more classic projects coming out through the years like the Above the Rim soundtrack and the Dog Food album, it became the perfect spot for Tupac's next destination, where he was signed to get out on bail, and immediately he took off, dropping California Love with Dr. Dre. Then 2 months later, he would drop his first album under Death Row called All Eyes on Me, which was a commercial smash, selling over 566,000 copies in the first week, and going 5 times platinum within 5 months, becoming the highest selling hip-hop album that year, spawning hits like How Do You Want It, I Ain't Mad At You, and of course 2 of America's Most Wanted featuring Snoop Dogg himself. It was clear that this year in 1996 it was Tupac's year, and he became priority number 1 on Death Row, replacing Snoop Dogg, while Dr. Dre half the time when he would be at recording sessions. With Death Row acquiring Tupac, it did come with a lot of success, but it also seemed like the energy became darker there too, especially with Suge Knight, the head of Death Row, being heavily affiliated with the mob Pirus. Not only that, but Snoop Dogg was also facing a murder case where his bodyguard shot and killed a rival gang member back in 1994, so it made sense why Snoop Dogg's main focus wasn't on music.
This can be a career ender, especially for celebrities, but not in the case of the rap singer who calls himself, quote, Snoop Doggy Dogg. A judge in Los Angeles refused today to drop murder charges against him, but the charges haven't hurt his career. In fact, some accuse the rapper of making crime pay.
But on February 20th, 1996, Snoop Dogg was cleared of all murder charges, and he began to work on his second studio highly anticipated album, The Dogfather, which would be Snoop's final album on his Death Row contract. But more problems were still arising from Snoop in the event of him being signed to Death Row due to the East Coast and West Coast beef, where Tupac was the most vocal artist. Dr. Dre ended up leaving Death Row entirely, and it seemed like tension was arising between Tupac and Snoop themselves, which started with Snoop Dogg saying that he has major love for Biggie, even though that was Tupac's main rival, and Tupac felt like Snoop wasn't riding for him publicly, but behind closed doors Snoop would diss Biggie with him, and some people around Death Row would say that Snoop would get jealous of the relationship that Tupac and Suge Knight had. If Tupac wanted something done his way, Suge Knight would always grant it to him, and whatever Tupac needed, he got it, no ifs, ands, or buts. It got so bad that even other label mates would say that their album got pushed back when Tupac was going to drop 7 Day Theory, but just as a mixtape originally, which was said that Suge Knight almost had a heart attack when he heard the album, and Tupac said that due to how good the album sounded at the time. But while all this was going on, Snoop Dogg was working on The Dogfather alongside additional producers like DJ Pooh, Daz Dillinger, Superfly, and LT Hutton, with Suge Knight executive producing this whole album. Snoop would reveal that he was working with Dr. Dre in the early process of this project, but Suge Knight wasn't having any of that due to Dre leaving Death Row, so Daz Dillinger had major production on this project and would have featured guest appearances from Charlie Wilson, Corrupt, Trey D, and Warren G, and others. The illustration on the back of the album cover would be done by Joe Cool, who also developed Snoop's first album, Doggy Style, Style. But on September 7th, 1996, Tupac was shot 5 times and 6 days later he would be pronounced dead, leaving many hip-hop fans and Snoop himself in shock. Due to the death of Tupac and the high demand for his music even more now, Snoop Dogg's The Dogfather album was pushed back even more so that Tupac's 7 Day Theory album would come out first, since it was being leaked and bootlegged on the streets. And on November 5th, 1996, it would be officially released, with it selling over 664,000 copies in the first week, becoming the highest selling hip-hop album that year for the first week, spawning tracks like To Live and Die in LA and a fan favorite Hail Mary. And then a week later, Snoop Dogg would finally get a chance to drop his second album, The Dogfather, which would be over 3 years since the last release of any project of his, so the anticipation for the project was mighty high, which worried some fans because they feared that the album would become lost in the turmoil and downfall of Death Row, especially with the death of Tupac and the release of his recently 7 Day Theory album a week prior. But most record executives thought different, and in fact when they found out that Snoop was gonna drop that week, they shifted the release dates for some rival rap albums to avoid Snoop's sales rush. The album will go on to sell 478,000 copies in the first week, with Tupac's 7 Day Theory album selling in the second week 205,000, and The Dogfather for the most part received some positive reviews, but it was heavily noted that it wasn't as successful or as good as his first album, and even some fans were disappointed and let down by Snoop Dogg due to how low effort this project sounded. The lyrics in this album had a drastic change in it and were more positive and uplifting. In the 2006 VH1 interview, Snoop Dogg would reveal the difference between the Doggy Style and the Dogfather albums, with him saying, "I think the Dogfather was a rebirth of me, as far as me being more positive in what I'm trying to say, and trying to live the life through my music, instead of me just trying to live my life trying to show people my life wasn't like my music. I'm not going to glorify none of this negativity that Death Row wanted me to do. I'm going to bring a positive side of music." And that right there could possibly play a huge role in why a lot of people didn't enjoy the album, because they was more so expecting the murder was a case type of energy on that project, since he just came off of being his murder charge. But it made sense why he would think like that and have that understanding, especially with the death of Tupac and the negative aura he had in his music. Probably played a huge role why he wanted to make more positive songs. It speaks some good into his life instead of death. Yes, with Dr. Dre missing, the album did lack a lot of that G-Funk sound that the first project had. It didn't have those sing-along hit songs like What's My Name and Gin and Juice you would hear at a club. In my opinion, it did get overshadowed by 7 Day Theory and All Eyes on Me, which came out way earlier prior that year, and it didn't live up to the height of a 3-year wait that Doggy Style had. But in Snoop's eyes, regardless, the album was still a success. I enjoy it, and everywhere I go around the world, people I sign more Dogfather records than any other record I put out. That's the one I signed the most, and I'm proud of the thing I did. And the thing is, sometimes you can outgrow your fans. When Dr. Dre was asked about the album and how he liked it, he stated saying, "But to be perfectly honest, I don't like Snoop's new album, and it has nothing to do with me not working with him, because I'm just like everybody else. The first time I heard the singles, I was grooving to it, but then I really started to get into the production and how it was sounding, The first time you hear some stuff, you just listen to it to get your groove on, but after that I start breaking songs down. There's really nothing that was said on there that hasn't been said 50 times before." Despite what anybody thinks about the Dogfather, overall it was still a success, with it being the 4th highest ranked debut that year in 1996, behind Tupac's All Eyes on Me, 7 Day Theory, and Metallica Low, and will go on to eventually be certified double platinum. My favorite song on here would have to be Downtown Assassins, featuring Daz Dillinger and Trey D. I feel like on this song they all deliver on their verses, and it was a glimpse of that gangster talk that everybody was expecting to be on this album in totality, especially on the intro of the album where it lists off all the controversies that Snoop Dogg been through.
Lately, Snoop Doggy Dogg has been spending more time at the criminal courts building than in the recording studio.
There has been no shortage of controversy for rapper Snoop Doggy Dogg.
And then the music just comes and you're waiting for that moment for the songs to hit you, but it just doesn't, like a Doggy Style would, and you just gotta sit there and listen to 21 tracks that are okay. They're not the best, they're not good, they don't stand out, they're just mid, and I felt like this album was dead on arrival due to all the circumstances that led up to it, and it never really had a fair shot, especially when you're competing with an album like Doggy Style, which was mixed and produced by Dr. Dre, who practically helped inform Snoop Dogg's G-Funk sound, to now in this album not being involved at all played a major part in this disappointment in my opinion. If you was to look at this project just for a Snoop Dogg album alone, it's pretty decent, but when you're comparing it to his prior and his peer Tupac Shakur, who was on a hit spree dropping back-to-back classic albums, it just doesn't live up to those, and I think that's why a lot of fans were disappointed with this, cause they were now looking at Snoop as the top dog of the label since Tupac went down, and they were expecting him to put Death Row on his back. But fortunately from Snoop Dogg, that was the last album from that Death Row contract, and the last time he would be referred to as Snoop Doggy Dogg, which was obviously a blessing in disguise. And in my opinion, besides Tupac dying, the Dogfather was the beginning of the downfall of Death Row, cause fans stopped looking at that label as the moniker of hip hop, and with Snoop, Tupac, and Dre all gone from the label, there was no way in hell that Death Row was gonna recover from that. In some people's eyes, the Dogfather may go down as one of the most disappointing albums to come from Death Row, or some may even enjoy and say that's their favorite album that Snoop has released ever. But to me, this album was the effect of the poor decision making that Death Row had. From the rollout to personal issues getting involved, due to money disagreements that they had between each other, and having favoritism over a certain artist, all played a role into this. This album was doomed to fail from the beginning and never live up to the hype of Doggy Style, and with the many other classic albums that Death Row had. Snoop would even reveal that a lot of the beats that he had for the Dogfather album under the production of Das, he told to give to Tupac for his All Eyes on Me album. But y'all let me know down below how y'all feel about this Dogfather album. Did y'all like it when it first came out? Did it live up to your expectations? Or you felt like the album was a disappointment and it wasn't worth the 3-year wait that it had? Y'all let me know down below. Be sure to like the video, comment, share, subscribe. Have a nice day.